looks like we've got some good numbers in attendance now. So thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you can see the start of the presentation slides on your screen. We are really happy to welcome all of the 5 net zero hubs to today's webinar, being hosted by the National Retrofit. Myself and my colleague Cara Jenkinson will be co-hosting the webinar today, and we look forward to hearing about the project that's been funded over the past year to 18 months by DESNZ, and really hearing about the learnings, the challenges, the successes of the regional skills pilots, hearing from people on the front line who have been making those projects happen. If we move forward, I will quickly go through the agenda, but as I said, this is part of the Working Group 3's Workforce Growth and Skills Development Group activity, where we're keen to make sure that the good work that's being done around the country is disseminated as much as possible, so that we reduce as much as possible any kind of areas of duplication and maximise the impact of the great work that's being done in different areas of the country. So today we've got 2 hours to go through the projects from the 5 regions, and as I said, we're really lucky to have the 5 hubs here today to be able to talk us through the projects that they've been running over the past year. After the break at 11 o'clock, we'll then look at some of those common themes that have materialised from the work, and discuss a little bit about the role of place-based skills solutions. Then we'll look at the resources that have been created through the project, make sure again that the project is maximised in terms of the impact and use that we get out of it. And we'll talk a little bit about the Regional Skills Taskforce checklist that was developed last year by Cara and Pippa Palmer as part of their work in Working Group 3 as well. Then we get to the really interesting part where we'll have a chance to talk to the hubs, and they'll be able to answer any questions you have. So if during the presentations in the first half of the webinar, if you have any questions for the hubs, please put them in the chat, and then Cara will be able to pick out some of those questions for us to be able to spend a good 20 minutes, because I think that's really where the interesting and insights come out during the kind of questions and answers section. And then we'll have a kind of closing remarks and finish by 12 o'clock. So without any further ado, let's kind of look at the background of the project. And as we know, I'm sure everyone in the webinar today is aware of the challenge ahead of us in meeting the government's 2050 net zero target. In terms of the skills that we need, we know that there's going to be a huge demand for training from the industry as consumer demand grows over the coming years and decades. But the retrofit training infrastructure is relatively immature, and so we need to expand and grow that in order to meet the demand, making sure that there's quality there as well. And local authorities also need to upskill to be able to deliver and integrate net zero needs into their projects, and become informed clients when they're part of the procurement process in funded programs going forward. So the Net Zero Hubs, for those that don't know, is a program funded by DESNZ to support local authorities and other organisations working at a local level. And they can help to support project delivery, energy planning, routes to financing, technical expertise and consultancy, innovation, and help connect for collaboration, which is obviously a key point of the project that we'll be looking at today. So we know that to achieve the carbon reduction targets over the coming decades, we need to decarbonise the housing stock through retrofit. This necessitates a construction workforce that is big enough and skilled enough to be able to do this work. And there are lots of good reports out there talking about the various numbers significant numbers across the board in construction skills. And in 2024, the 5 hubs across England delivered retrofit skills plans through this pilot program with funding, as I said, from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, where each of the hubs looked at developing retrofit skills plans, and then also received funding to pilot implementation activities that had been identified in the plan. And the program is currently undergoing evaluation by the department to determine the next steps. So with that, I'd like to ask the representative from the Northwest Net Zero Hub to introduce themselves and talk through their project, and just let me know when you want me to move forward through the slides.
Thanks, Rob. Hi everyone, Marissa Luby from the Northwest Net Zero Hub. I'm the Home Energy Lead, so responsible for anything housing decarbonisation in the hub. So just a quick little bit about the plan. So in the Northwest, we produced our plan concurrently alongside Test and Learn pilot projects. And we work predominantly with some local authority skills groups, our local authority program delivery, retrofit delivery groups, and colleges. And we use those findings to support the creation of the plan, which you can download from the link in the attached. I think you'll get the slides after, so you can click on those. I think key to highlight that this was a DESNZ funded initiative. Often I think we find skills funding from, coming from Department for Education. But DESNZ was really keen to understand a key barrier that we were seeing in retrofit delivery programs, a lack of supply chain and gaps in capacity in delivery. So why weren't our existing skills funding, and delivery of, grant funding initiatives addressing this gap? The plan produced 11 key findings in the Northwest, shared on screen here. You've probably had a read of them as I'm talking. And I suspect you'll hear a lot of common themes today, including having a low proportion of people working in retrofit relative to the construction sector, having skills gaps in key growth areas such as low carbon heating technology and retrofit coordination, some 2 real growth areas that are real, coming to pinch points, and needing quality and consistency across course design, facilities, and learning environments throughout our regions. So if we go to the next slide, Rob. In response to the findings and the data and the evidence, that we've pulled into the plan, we identified 5 key priority areas and future projects. And then these future projects are broken down into KPIs and outputs, what we'd need to see to really, really fix and address some of these priority areas. So again, probably very consistent throughout. We need to upskill our existing workforce. We need to grow our future workforce, so focus on our young learners as well. Increasing diversity in the workforce. This is a wider construction problem, but also within retrofit as well. We need to build business support and capability for businesses and employers to be able to work in retrofit in grant funding. And then develop our training capacity, working with our colleges and our independent training providers and creating a consistent, set of training outputs for our region. So if we go to the next slide. So we've piloted some projects already with kind of a short 3-month test and learn, activity that, as I said, was built into the plan. And, we achieved some really good outcomes. I think the strength in creating a plan was understanding the whole system surrounding the retrofit skills gap. We're able to join key stakeholders, together that were often in disparate parts. Colleges loved collaborative working. Colleges working with colleges, within their own sub-regions to support their own upskilling. Delivery teams found better links with skills and training providers. Our delivery teams who are pushing and getting complex projects underway are sitting here, and our skills teams are sitting over here. How do we better connect what one's doing on one side to the other? And I think that's one of my key learnings. You know, it may sound simple, but let's better connect parts of the retrofit system to make it a whole. So here's some example projects on screen, and I'll do one or two in more detail. It's a very big, quick fly through. In Liverpool, we funded the creation of a new heat pump training facility, which was opened by the Metro Mayor. And as a result, this facility can now take on bootcamp funding because it has a facility to run it. May sound simple, but this shows some areas are still lacking upfront capital investment to get those facilities up and running. In Cheshire and Warrington, we worked with a housing provider to understand how to engage unemployed social housing tenants in retrofit careers. Really useful study in recommending how tenant engagement can go beyond delivery of retrofit measures into supporting employment. And in Greater Manchester, we funded the creation of virtual learning, virtual reality learning environments to support retrofit coordination and assessment in online training tools. So, you know, how can other types of technology be used by colleges in, you know, it showed how different areas are at different stages of their retrofit training. You know, and I suppose sometimes college capacity and delivery capacity didn't align, you know, so there were some really great regional facilities out there where potentially sometimes delivery may have been lacking or not historically as strong in some areas. So I think, as we're saying, how do we join up some of these really great examples with what's needed in the retrofit delivery as well? But if we go to the next slide, Rob. I just wanted to focus on two very quickly. There were consistent projects undertaken across the region. And, you know, quite frankly, some of these were quite simple projects, but they can really support and address outcomes, which is why I put them on screen today. This first one is, you know, an employer engagement example in Cumbria. Lakes College ran employer awareness of retrofit. They surveyed 200 companies for their training needs. And as a result, 75 of those employers enrolled on an introduction to retrofit course. You know, this was quite strong numbers from engagement as a simple mechanism to support business. But we're told many times through this work that this type of revenue funding is sometimes difficult for colleges to find. So while we still do need capital funding sometimes to get those facilities up and running, the kind of revenue funding to do these kind of mechanisms was hard to find. And then the next slide. Another, you know, revenue funding type example is staff CPD. You know, every area wanted to use some of this funding to continue, you know, continuing professional development to upskill their staff to train in retrofit. In Lancashire, it was, as we were talking about collaboration, 4 colleges undertook joint training with the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. So 52 tutors attended a session where they learned from commercial manufacturing processes, you know, what's happening in the kind of non-domestic building side and how is that going to influence retrofit in homes, for example, digital and smart technologies. But then also how retrofit exists as many trades and subsectors, and how can we think about retrofit in the whole as a college course offer. So each college was able to kind of brainstorm collaboratively and then take back those learnings to influence future course design and setup. And just finally, I think I'm on time, which is good. Next slide, Rob. I just wanted to flag that when we did all of this work with colleges, we produced a series of retrofit skills videos. One set is, you know, for employers and based on upskilling. And then the second set is, you know, focused on young learners and new careers. And there's different formats available, you know, 1 minute, 2 minute, and 30-second kind of more social media type videos. But really trying to explain what retrofit is, why it's a career that should, you know, people should look into or upskill. So yeah, I encourage you to have a look. Thanks, Rob.
It's brilliant. Thank you so much, Marissa. And yeah, I mean, hearing loud and clear those kind of key messages about how to bring together that kind of joined up approach. You know, it can sound simple, and I think you talk about kind of right skills in the right place at the right time. Yeah, sounds simple enough, but it's an incredibly difficult thing to be able to achieve, and this type of engagement. is a really good example of the learning that you've been able to do in terms of learning about all of the different parts, the moving parts of the system that you need to engage with and have working kind of in a synchronized way, if you like. So yeah, really interesting. And just for everyone listening, we'll be sharing the slides at the end of the webinar. So you'll have access to all of the resources, and we encourage you to go and have a look at all of the resources that have been created throughout the project. So if we quickly move on then, on time, thank you so much, Marissa, to the North East and Yorkshire Hub.
Good morning, everyone. So that's me.
Is still there. Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do you want to move on to my first slide? Fabulous, thank you. So I'm going to just a little bit of context here. So our region, the North Eastern Yorkshire region, is slightly unusual in the sense that we are a region that is covered by mayoral combined authorities. Certainly at the time of undertaking this plan, there were 5 in existence. There are now 6, so the whole region is covered by MCAs, and that does give us a slightly kind of different nuance and approach to regional delivery. The MCAs have kind of absorbed the skills mandate of the former local enterprise partnerships, and many of them have a kind of a high priority skills role at the moment, and are doing their own kind of work on skills needs, which, as we found out when we started this pilot, the kind of operating strategies or the kind of plans that they were developing were not necessarily aligned to the timescales that we were working to. So our plan was developed with very extensive engagement with local authorities, with combined authorities, also with education providers and even community energy groups, interested parties generally. But the kind of planning and development of it was very kind of iterative and very strongly influenced by qualitative work rather than a kind of a big sweep of data. We were coming from a fairly basic position of there not having been an awful lot of work in this space previously, and the kind of data from some areas being developed but not necessarily within the timeframes for this this project. But what that meant was that we had a lot of really kind of strong buy-in from the people who did get involved, and we created what was known as a community panel, which helped us kind of test the concepts and the findings as we went along and develop the kind of conclusions for the skills plan. What we found was that across the whole region, there is a need to retrofit 2.2 million homes by 2035. If we're going to achieve that EPC rating, C for all homes. And as you see from the map, it is a bit of a varied picture across the region. The whole region has challenges, but there are particular pinch points in Yorkshire, in North Yorkshire and West Yorkshire in particular, which have particular challenging conditions, rural stone built properties, that kind of thing, that need to be addressed. And I think one of the things that we found out from talking to providers in particular was the difficulties that they have with recruiting suitably qualified tutors. Very often industry pays more highly, and so you end up in this kind of self-fulfilling cycle where it's difficult to train people because you can't get the experience. Also, a real challenge around suppliers and the supply chain having limited awareness of retrofit as a concept or of the local training offer. And a particular challenge for us regionally, I know it's a national issue, but a particular challenge for us around retrofit assessors and the number that would be needed to deliver over the coming years. So these were the areas that we really kind of focused in on in terms of the plan. Next slide, please. So the plan developed concepts for kind of 6 overarching pilot projects, which I've kind of identified at a fairly high level there in terms of the focus and the aims. And the intention is not to go into detail, but the ones that are highlighted in black, they're the ones that we took forward with the funding that we received for delivery. So there are just 2 that we could do with that funding and within those timescales, and they were scaled back as well. We weren't able to deliver them in full, but we kind of made a start and did some testing with those. It's come out slightly awkwardly on the screen, but Pilot E, the retrofit careers bolt-on, I've just kind of flagged that separately because while that didn't go through in this pilot, it is something that we've kind of picked up and started work on separately. So there's a kind of mini project linked to this that's running at the moment and will be delivered over the coming months. But yeah, as you see, the pilots were actually focused very much around trying to kind of develop pathways into retrofits. I give people the awareness and the understanding of what the opportunities are, and working with supply chain to try and encourage them to kind of upskill their teams. And the 2 that we pulled forward were one around working with FE training providers in particular to help them better meet the needs of industry, and also interventions that kind of bring together retrofit funders, industry and training providers to try and develop networks and opportunities for kind of collaboration and co-creation of opportunities going forward. Next slide, please. So the first one I'll just kind of pick up on was the Delivery Innovation Fund. So we effectively ran that as a micro grant scheme and put out the opportunity to apply for some funding to FE colleges and other similar education providers. And interestingly, we had an idea in our heads from the plan development which colleges might come forward and what they might come forward for, and they didn't. But we got some that were off radar coming forward instead, which I suppose just goes to show that the kind of serendipitous nature of this activity sometimes. The 2 projects that came forward, one in Hull and East Yorkshire, and one of the interesting things about that one is it was very much a collaboration, but it's a collaboration of a very urban college with a very rural college, and ostensibly very different intakes of students and different delivery, but they were working together to kind of share access to the resources and the expertise and the training materials that they each had available to develop both sets of staff and trainers to kind of build that bigger picture. And Gateshead College had also been working with an organisation already to develop some CPD resources. So this was really, very much focusing on CPD of existing staff and helping to upskill some of the existing trainers in FE provision who might have been kind of out of the game for a little while, not quite up to speed with modern technologies and modern work. And I think, it really highlighted some of the challenges they faced around trainers having limited hands-on experience, but also high costs and regulatory complexity that they need to kind of work around. And I suppose one of the kind of observations that we had from this delivery was the lack of participant diversity. If you were going to identify a typical trainer in engineering technologies, you're probably going to think white male, maybe middle-aged, and that was very much the cohort that was working, that was involved in these pilots. So definitely an opportunity there to kind of explore further. But in terms of impact, it did mean that 90 members of staff received new level 3 equivalent qualifications, definitely increased their understanding of net zero targets and retrofitting benefits, and they had greater awareness of the relevance of retrofitting, potentially, you know, shifted career perspectives. And I think really kind of pointed to the need for further CPD and hands-on learning opportunities within education environments. Next slide, please. So the second pilot was the kind of retrofit skills partnerships, sort of how we couched it, and was really kind of 3 mini projects wrapped up into this kind of overarching pilot. So we were working in this case with community interest companies, people who were involved in the retrofit industry, and also to some extent community energy, who are very keen to kind of develop the sector and develop the opportunities. And this was really about, within the time frame available and the budget available, starting off with kind of workshops and events as a kind of a kick-off for further engagement and networking, and just exploring different ways of doing this, how to kind of most effectively bring people together, what kind of, you know, messaging and that kind of thing to employ. They were all in-person events. They used a range of different marketing, including radio and online web scraping. So the pilots enabled us to get a good idea of what was kind of successful and what wasn't. Challenges, there was a high level of dropout. I think that's kind of inevitable. You kind of, whenever you're organising events, you always get a certain amount of attrition. And point to note, radio, don't bother. And AI-driven kind of scraping, also a bit mixed. So nothing really beats those kind of one-to-one relationships and contacts and reaching out to people directly. But in terms of impact, obviously, it's difficult to kind of get a sense of strong impact from these small events, but a general increase in policy and supply chain knowledge and new collaborations agreed, which was great. Next slide, please. And just a final kind of insight into the careers education information advice guidance review that we're undertaking. So this is the one that's kind of linked back to the plan, but sits slightly differently from the pilot itself. And we're just about to undertake an assessment of that activity in the region, how well it represents current and future net zero career opportunities, how well it engages participants, that kind of thing. We're about to go out to tender shortly. It's being led by Hull and East Yorkshire and the regional project manager who's based there. So some hopefully interesting insights to come out of that in the next few months. Next slide, please. That might be the last one. Yeah, thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Karen. That was yeah, really useful reminder. As you say, you're working within a landscape with kind of moving parts, which makes the collaboration really difficult and really challenges. Another thing that we have to kind of acknowledge as we're trying to coordinate activities. And then, yeah, I just think the level of detail that you're able to get and the insights from colleges, understanding what they need so that they can provide high quality training and get the right people into the courses and the right people delivering the courses, is essential and really useful knowledge as we go forward, because we need to make sure we're providing training that works for learners, that works for the training providers, and also for employers all at the same time. So really useful to get that level of insight. So thank you for that. And yeah, we'll move on to the Midlands Net Zero Hub for the next presentation.
Thank you, Rob. Morning all. So I'm Panima Rambaran, a Net Zero Programme Manager at the Midlands Energy Hub. If you could just move on to the first slide, please, Rob. Thank you. So with the Midlands kind of, the approach we took for phase one was kind of, we went kind of for a launch of expression of interest. And from that launch, we kind of selected 3 successful LAs, and they were Bolsover, Birmingham and East Lindsey district councils. Each of those kind of LAs produced like kind of their own kind of local kind of skills plans, and from there we procured a consultant, Opporgy Limited, who kind of looked at their the 3 kind of local skills plans and did some further engagement and research for the Midlands wide area, and then produced the Midlands kind of skills plans based on kind of these 3 local plans there. The next one, please, Rob. Thank you. So kind of obviously, as I said, Opporgy produced the Midlands retrofit skills plan there, and I've kind of on this slide I've tried to put like kind of the key findings from the skills plan. So kind of the challenges identified was kind of insufficient existing construction workers gaining the knowledge and skills, and this one was kind of mainly kind of with SMEs in the kind of retrofit industry there. Kind of these sole traders really kind of had short planning window, we found, and they're kind of focusing on kind of immediate workload, and they've not really got the time for long-term planning, or to kind of or the drive as well to look into kind of gaining retrofit skills. So that was the first challenge that we kind of found during the production of the plan. Second one, we all kind of touched upon that lack of new entrants wanting to gain skills. So we think there is a lot that we need to do to be really proactive, kind of to push young people into the kind of retrofit green careers there. The third kind of challenge that we came across was insufficient coordination to reduce unnecessary work duplications. And we kind of, that there is a kind of a demand to manage, the work and the skills shortage in this industry. For example, we thought, there could be like a central capacity to collect and make available archetype details and retrofit designs that could be used for common dwelling designs, found across the Midlands. The second opportunity that came kind of up as well was coordinating retrofit across the Midlands, so that kind of adjacent new dwellings are being retrofitted about the same time. So there's kind of, not duplications of work there. And the fourth challenge identified in the plan was with respect to kind of the volume of work needed for tradesperson to kind of just to provide evidence to be trust marked under ECO and things like that, or PAS 2035. So often these tradespeople kind of, they might not be suitable to do all these admin type of things. So there could be like kind of a bit more support, to them to kind of become trust marked, certified and everything. Obviously, details of all of these kind of are in the plan, and we could share that as well with everybody here. So that's just kind of key kind of things on the challenges. Recommendations, there were 9 key recommendations from the skills and the Midlands skills plan, and some of, we thought we could kind of establish a group to guide stakeholders, i.e. LAs, employers and everything in the region. One of them like developing and implementing the youth engagement program to promote careers in the sector. Communication plan to raise awareness of the careers with tradespeople, new entrants and career transitions as well. And just supporting SMEs as well, and encouraging employers to take on apprentices and things like that. We also thought kind of it might be worth kind of collating data on skills and employment in the sector, and kind of forecasting the skills demand, so planning can be done adequately there. So that's a really kind of a brief overview of the findings there for you. If we could just move on to the next one, please, Rob, thank you. So obviously from those kind of, from the phase 1 plan, there was some work that was done with the 3 LAs, Opporgy and everything, just to refine some of the proposals, activities, so we can deliver them in the time frame set for phase 2. And what I've tried to do here in the next 2 or 3 slides, I've highlighted the key outputs, and I've kind of categorized them under key themes as well. So the first one with regard to kind of increasing awareness, you know, trying to kind of maximize new entrants in the retrofit kind of to gain retrofit career and things like that. So it is also worth mentioning Bolsover kind of took the lead for phase 2, just because of the timeline set. We had to do something to streamline some of the approved activities. So there was a bit of a lead from Bolsover, and together with their kind of partner, their RLB, which took kind of, you know, streamlined quite a lot of activities, making it possible to deliver within the time frame here. So on this kind of, you can see there was an engagement brochure kind of developed. The kind of the screenshots of that is included on the slides. Engagement strategy developed by Bolsover. Birmingham City Council developed a poster, flyer. There was quite a lot of these things as well. And the work experience strategy was developed by kind of Bolsover, just to kind of, you know, how do we go about kind of encouraging employers to take on apprentices and things like that. Next one, please, Rob. Thank you. The second kind of, you know, lots of activities undertaken was with regard to kind of investment in retrofit training infrastructure for colleges and universities. And I've listed some of the ones, the key stakeholders that were involved in these kind of activities here. So overall, there was about 12 training rigs, full training rigs delivered to colleges and universities. A lot of training kind of rig components delivered that would be used to kind of configure at least 14 heat pumps rigs there. And it was kind of, it is estimated that these kind of training rigs will be beneficial for over 2,000 students and apprentices per year for each of, you know, across these colleges and universities. Next one, please. Rob, thank you. The third lots of activities undertaken. This one was with Birmingham City Councils. They did. It was all about kind of how do we kind of engage SMEs to, you know, attract them to into the retrofit industry, provide practical advice and everything to overcome the barriers to entry there. So three videos were created there, and I've just included the links on the slides, which you'll be able to kind of have a look at when these are shared with you guys. Thank you. The next lot of activities we did, CPD package materials were developed based, you know, kind of focusing on the green skills, retrofit skills. These packages, these sessions were delivered to over 12 retrofit career professionals. There was 10 retrofit trainings delivered for key staff within the LAs, just to increase, you know, understanding of the whole net zero targets and things like that. Next one, please. Thank you. And I think that's should be the last lot of activities I've kind of captured here. So this was about kind of, you know, how do we go about kind of bringing everybody together, bringing the key stakeholders together to build networks, to share knowledge and everything. So there was 2 employer forums held, engaging over 30 businesses there, 3 workshops held with over 16 LAs, 1 educator forum held as well, and the findings of the forum was reported as well. So just them screenshots are just kind of, you know, the first slides that were used for these forums. But obviously, you know, if anybody wants to see them in more detail, I'm sure we can share those as well. And that's me really, Rob. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bonima. That was fantastic. And I think it's really interesting to see from all of the regions that we've heard from so far, and I'm sure it's the same for the next 2, the amount of engagement activities that have taken place using different types of media. So we've got YouTube, radio, in-person events. So there should be, you know, a really good opportunity for us to evaluate which ones worked well, which ones didn't, to make sure that we're targeting that engagement activity in the right place. But I think it's also worth noting that for engagement activities and works in schools about new entrants coming into the sector, it's very difficult to kind of measure the impact that those activities are having, especially over the short term. So you need that kind of longer term time frame to really be able to see the impact that those activities are having. Yeah, also kind of key to note as well your point around SMEs and the support that they need to overcome some of the barriers to accreditation and things like that as well. I think that's something we've seen across the different regions as well. Okay, brilliant. So we move on to the Southwest. So hopefully Linda is online to talk us through the work that's been taking place in the Southwest.
Yeah, do you want to go on to the slides? Yeah, so the title slide is just to include the links to the reports. The top one is the piece of work that was funded through this project, where the Southwest developed a roadmap for retrofit skills, and it built on a previous report. So I've just put the link for both of those in that you can go and look at after this webinar. So this is a map of the Southwest, and for those people who don't live in the Southwest, it probably feels a long way away from where you are. And when this piece of work was done, it was based on the LEP areas that don't exist anymore. It's interesting to hear the North, was it the North? Anyway, whichever hub it was who's covered entirely by combined authorities, we have one, which is the West of England, and the rest are all sort of county type areas that are not combined authorities. So I've listed them by their council names, but in the report, it often refers to the LEP because that's what it was at the time we did the report. So there you go. It might be a bit confusing if you don't know the area. Yep, next slide. So in the Southwest, we were focused on gathering data so that we could develop a plan that was based on the information that we found that was specific to the Southwest. The research that was undertaken was a mix of qualitative and quantitative, and the qualitative stuff had 25 organisations involved, which was a mix of different actors, local government representatives, business representative groups, installers, and a social housing provider as well. Quite a lot of the people and organisations have experience of delivering the government grant programmes for retrofits. That was quite well represented. And the company that did the GemServe did the research for us. They used a mix of focus groups. They did some one-to-one interviews with further education providers. And they also did a survey on retrofit to 10 local authorities and installers. And then they did some quantitative research, which was looking at the number of training centres that we have in the Southwest and what kind of courses they offered. Some were retrofit specific courses, and then some had a retrofit component, and they looked at things like the cost, the level of those courses, and how long they took. Then they looked at an estimate of the current skills and the required skills in the region based on the number of installs that we would need to meet the Net Zero 2050 targets by comparing those with historic training rates. They had to use like national training rates that were sort of ascribed to the Southwest. But anyway, they modeled that and compared it to what's needed to get this kind of skills challenge, basically the gap between the two. And they also looked at the value for money of different training. So that was done by looking at the economic potential of the, basically, yeah, like the value added before and after somebody doing training. But again, it wasn't like specific people. It was a model that they did. So yeah, so the information on screen just summarizes the different organizations and the geographic spread. It's not consistent across the region, so it potentially does add some skew, particularly towards the north bit, where I'm based in the Bristol area. Next slide. Thanks. So this is just setting out the scale of the challenge. So for us in the Southwest, again, this is based on meeting net zero 2050. The numbers on screen show, so we need 2.5 million air source heat pumps, 500,000 ground source, 1.4 million wall insulations, mix of solid wall, cavity wall. And that would take apparently 166 years for the insulation, 200 years for the air source heat pumps, and 278 for the ground source heat pumps if we carried on at the rate we're delivering now. I'm sure that's not of any surprise to anyone on this call. Will have come across very similar stats either nationally or for your regions. And then, so basically in terms of the actual skills, we need something like 3,000 solid wall installers, something like 9,000 heat pump engineers, and that's actually over a relatively short time frame. To reach net zero 2030, I'm sure you can probably guess what might be needed. Most of our local authorities in the Southwest have net zero 2030 targets. Yeah, something like 10,000 solid wall installers and 17,500 heat pump engineers. I think perhaps we can park that and focus on 2050. But anyway, even for 2050, the graph is kind of showing you the requirement in terms of the growth of the different types of skills that we need in the Southwest, and pretty much everything. You're looking at over 10% kind of compound growth in most skills areas. It's particularly low carbon heating. And that's, I guess, because not all homes necessarily need insulating, but they all need their heating decarbonising. And the highest demand is in the urban areas, which is not really surprising. But also there are some areas in the Southwest with solid wall homes where more skills requirement. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is looking at the makeup of the current workforce. It's probably quite hard to make out, but if you want to scrutinise it afterwards, feel free. The different coloured bands are the different areas of the Southwest. And so it does show up some differences between areas. So I think Cornwall, for example, and Devon, Somerset have the lowest of low carbon heating. Yeah, sorry, you can see that. So the graphs on the right are basically like heat maps of the different skills. So the top one is low carbon heating, and yellow is sort of relatively good. But just to be clear, yellow doesn't mean actually good. None of them are going to meet the level that we need. But there's more in the yellow areas and less in the dark blue areas. So it's not really consistent across the Southwest. And that's part of the interesting thing of what we've picked up is there are specific areas that have less of different types of installers. So fabric efficiency installers are more concentrated in urban areas, which is probably not that surprising. But interestingly, the low carbon heating, which you might expect somewhere like Bristol would have a high concentration, actually really doesn't. So curious. Next slide, please. This is just showing where our colleges are. Blobs for each provider, with the larger blobs having more courses, and orange is further education, whereas turquoise is independent training providers. So it's quite useful having that map. There are 45 in total, 34 are further education, 11 are independent college providers. And they have around 12,000 students per year between them, which is around 10% of their total enrolments. There are also some new colleges, that including a specialised retrofit training centre that opened apparently in Exeter last year, so that's exciting. But there are massive cold spots, so North Cornwall, North Devon, North Dorset, large parts of Wiltshire and Hampshire, aside from the massive urban areas in the very east of our patch. There just is no training at all. So that makes it very difficult for anyone who lives in those areas to really consider moving into this sector. Oh yeah, so there's a list of the colleges that have a lot of courses there, which basically means that the colleges that aren't on that list have very, very few courses. independent training providers generally are more focused on the retrofit specific courses, whereas further education have a lot of students and a lot of throughput, but generally through more like general construction training with retrofit elements. Next slide, please. This is just showing the training that's been completed over time. So you can see, so this is just looking at the certificates that were issued, is how they measured this. So unsurprisingly, there's more courses at the lower levels and less for the highest level of qualification. But the good thing is that the number of courses has increased, particularly in the last few years. And the level of qualification is also increasing, particularly level 3, which is most heat pump courses are level 3. So that's good. So they're looking at apprenticeships, which is over a year. New entrants to the industry would be a course over 20 days, and then upskilling is presumed to be less than 20 days. For example, going from fossil heating to low carbon heating. And so the Sankey diagram shows of all the courses in that period from 2012 to 2023, who's going into which particular part of the sector, which is really fascinating. And most people are upskilling for insulation, retrofit, general retrofit project management. 95% of all apprenticeships are for heat pump installers. We didn't include general plumbing or heating courses, even if they had low carbon heating in them. So there could be more than what's shown. And the good thing is that apprenticeships have gone from 1% to 4%. So even though it's really tiny, it's the little red band in the middle, it has grown. You just can't see it on the graph. Next slide. This is from GemServe. It's an attempt at representing the kind of circular challenge of consumer demand not creating the need for companies to upskill their workforce, which then means they aren't there and there's no demand for the training and so on. So you've got this kind of structural issue that is quite hard to break. So I'll just tell you some of the things that we've picked up that are issues. Is mostly from the qualitative research interviews that we did in the Southwest. So there is a general shortage of construction skills, which means there is always enough work for businesses. They don't need to reskill and move into retrofit to have a successful business, and that obviously is quite a challenge. For example, gas boiler installers have really long waiting lists. There's really very little motivation to retrain as a heat pump installer. Construction courses are full, the teaching staff are at capacity, and there is competition from other specialised sectors. In the Southwest, there's a large marine industry. We've got huge nuclear installations and a lot of nuclear expertise, construction skills for all of those, and future floating offshore wind and other sectors. So it's not like we can just say, but retrofit's really important. There are all these other things that are also putting a pull onto the general construction skills sector. Constrained budgets for education providers means that a course has to prove its worth very quickly. And we had feedback that Ofsted will challenge a course if there's no immediate progression route. There has to be already industry demand for the skills that they're training for, which in particular, something like heat pumps, where we want to create that demand. You can see how there's just it's very tricky to unpick that one. It's challenging to recruit and retain staff because they need up-to-date practical knowledge. The salaries in education are lower than in industries, as has already been said. Retraining existing staff means arranging industry training, and so there is a need for stronger links between industry and training to enable that. Interestingly, it was noted that young people are very motivated by concern over the climate crisis, but they're not really clear what a green job is. So actually careers advice is not really doing its job on that one. There's a positive opportunity for investment. It was found that all training courses deliver significant net economic gain. So this is something that is worth putting money into. Larger training providers offer better value for money just because of economies of scale. So I think the next slide, hopefully I'm coming towards the end. This is, so in terms of the recommendations, what we're looking at is trying to address the gaps in current provision. That's in terms of the specific types and the geographical location for those. Adding retrofit to existing courses in general construction. The second is easily deliverable, low cost and low risk. But we also need to attract new entrants because of the aging workforce and industry growth. Installation installer courses in particular need to be targeted to Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly immediately, and Wiltshire, Swindon and the west of England over the next 5 years. Heat pump installer courses need to be rapidly scaled up because this is where the highest skills gap is. But there's also a number of underpinning enablers, so facilities and equipment to scale the training, scaling up staff training, recruitment, improving links between employers and training providers, as I've said, and then careers advice being absolutely critical. And retrofit services courses could be subsidised, ideally offered online. And what came out of all this research, on the next slide, we had 2 proposed pilots in the Southwest. One was the idea of providing vouchers for training in rural areas. So this is just, you know, people in those North Devon, North Cornwall, etc., where it's just so difficult for them to actually get to a training centre. The voucher could potentially cover the cost of not just the training, but travel to get there, and hopefully have that kind of social justice element, not just talking about numbers at a high level. Secondly, the other proposal is to develop videos that showcase individual job roles, and that would be aimed at secondary age children. We didn't deliver those in the funding window that was available. They were quite complicated projects that would have needed a lot of work to do, and it just simply wasn't practicable. And at the moment, we don't in the Southwest have the in-house skills within the hub to actually progress those, but would definitely be keen to take a facilitating role if these were picked up in future. So in conclusion, a lot of learning in a very short period of time, and we're very well set up for future action, and keen to take that on.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Linda. Yeah, it's really interesting to when we think about the analysis that provides a really good kind of evidence base for targeting activities going forward. It is quite challenging sometimes because of the kind of confusion around what constitutes retrofit, and where people are talking about green skills or construction, you know, where exactly does retrofit fit in? And that's for kind of, I guess, the workforce as well as training providers as well. You see in a lot of FE colleges, sometimes retrofit specific courses will be under construction or in a green skills section as well. So there's a bit of a kind of grey area that doesn't help on the analysis, but really useful as well to see where those cold spots are, especially in rural areas. And when we talk about the need to make sure training is done so that it works for learners, training providers and employers, we have to make sure that it's as easy as possible for people to access the training, you know, especially when the in-person element is so critical as well. So thank you for that, and I will pass over to Jen for the Greater South East Net Zero Hubs update. I think, okay, so Jen, in terms of the timing, sorry to interrupt, we'll if you have your 10 minutes, then we'll have the break at 10 past until 20 past. I built in that kind of buffer at the end of the whole webinar for the summary. So please go ahead and use 8 minutes, and we'll finish at 10 past for a break. Thanks.
8 minutes, you're spoiling me there. You'll have to shout at me if I'm running over time, because I get quite passionate about these things and I want to talk quite a lot. So just give me a nod if I'm running over. Okay, good morning all. I'm Genevieve Dady. I'm Supply Chain Development Manager for the Greater South East Net Zero Hub, and I'm here to cover mainly what was achieved in the Greater South East area through the Skills Pilot Programme. So you can see on a map where we are. It's a very lurid map, apologies for that. But it does give you a sense if you can read the titles of the area that we cover, which is basically the east of England and the southeast. And so given the size of our patch, the hub took a local place-based approach from the outset. So it's not hugely dissimilar to from the Midlands. And so we went out to strategic bodies for local plans and solutions. And 5 areas were successful, as you can see there. That was East Sussex, Hertfordshire, South London, Surrey and Buckinghamshire. And I think we've got representatives from most of those in the room today, which is really good to see. So these are all very different areas with different challenges, and different demography, housing stock, skills provision, and so of course alongside those differences, different solutions in order to be able to address their skills gaps. So existing research was utilised with some additional research in terms of lots of engagement across all of the areas, and this involves obviously a lot of work in a short period of time. We didn't have a lot of time to deliver the project, but built on existing plans and relationships, we really did give some of our areas a bit of a head start. So in short, all of the pilot teams produced their individual plans, which incorporated their findings and their suggested implementation solutions, and then they were able to bid for phase 2 funding. And as I say, once you get the slides, you should be able to follow the on-screen link to the Greater South East Plan, which also includes those local plans within it. We then commissioned Energy Systems Catapult to pull all that information together into one plan, because we had a regional brief to follow. And they also produced an evaluation report for us. So a lot of work went into those plans, and it was really intensive given the timescales, but there was a great amount achieved, and that's what I'm going to discuss going forward. So thank you. If you can move on to the next slide, Rob. Okay, this is a very short summary, just to give you a flavour of some of what was found across the various areas, and try and differentiate also from the other hubs. So again, as I said before, please read the Greater South East Plan and the details within that, and those individual area plans are annexed within it, and so really worth a read. And that plan also covers some of the regional headline figures, which I'm not going to necessarily talk about today. So while there are similarities across the area, and you'll find across the country, in fact, in terms of gaps and barriers to skills, and as was mentioned by my colleagues in the earlier slides, but these plans did identify some differences in a number of key areas. So it's just important to note that this just doesn't represent the situation for every single area, but it's just to sort of to give you a snapshot piece. So in terms of housing stock, there's very, very different housing stock, both between areas and within areas, as you'd expect. So East Sussex, for instance, has a lot of coastal deprivation, and comparatively high rate of social value stock, social housing stock, sorry, relative to the other areas. So it's important for us to look at that housing stock, as that sort of indicates the scale of the retrofit required, the scale of the challenge, and therefore the level and types of skills interventions needed. The retrofit sector, I mean, I think that's been talked about by colleagues before, so I won't go into too much detail, but we saw different areas with different baselines. So Buckinghamshire probably started with the lowest baseline, but they've seen some real conversations open up and some further initiatives since publishing their plans. So it's been really good to see the work that they've put in. And then also Hertfordshire has been able to build on their less mature sector and have really started some momentum in the county. Other areas such as South London have more supply chain, as you'd expect for a metropolitan area, but engaging them was originally quite a constraint. And as shown on here, and some of the bullet points that you can read yourselves, a lot of businesses don't know where to look for either skills or training or funding, or how to work on government schemes. There's a big long way to go. And in terms of demand, as will be mentioned at every retrofit skills webinar that you attend, is also a key issue and a driver for both the net zero domestic retrofit sector and the training sector that serves them. So this is something that's picked up across all of the pilot areas, and I think across all of the hubs. So courses are being put on but not necessarily being filled. We know why this is, because as we said before, businesses don't necessarily see the demand for retrofits, so then they don't put effort into upskilling their employees, and this is definitely something that needs to be addressed. Similarly, as I say, businesses don't always see the need for accreditation, especially when that demand doesn't seem to be there. Just briefly, local authorities. So there was noted across some of the areas that there's actually a lack of in-house capacity, particularly, and in some cases skills, in what's a very quite a technical subject area. And also, the link between procurement and how we get local firms involved in delivery in retrofit as well is worth looking at. And say last but certainly not least was the skills provision aspects. So I think, as has been mentioned before, but is a key issue, is the lack of tutors to serve the current and the forecast need. It's a big problem. So this is to a large extent a market issue, because trainers are generally paid far less than they could get out in the field. But also the technology is often changing as well, so there's an added dimension to that. And then, as before, and for the reasons above, training demand is quite low, as retrofit demand is seen as low by installers. There was also deemed to be a lack of local policy drivers, and I say this is where these pilots, I think, and that take the learning from these pilots will be particularly valuable. Next slide, please, Rob. So just onto our case studies, I want to bring some of what was done and some of the achievements and the implementation activity to life a bit more. So we've got two case studies. I've tried to come up with two case studies from different areas and with very different subject matter, but I'm aware that there's a lot of great work across all of the organisations. So I could speak for a good half an hour or so with 10 or more great examples of those. So local teams, most of them are on here, can fill in any gaps regard to the detail of the delivery and the questions. So first case study is from Hertfordshire's pilot. So their 8-point action plan included, amongst other areas, such as raising employer awareness, participation, all the sorts of things you'd expect to see, the following key items. So increasing retrofit awareness amongst colleges, independent training providers and businesses, increasing employer engagement in retrofit, increasing retrofit training provision, increasing the uptake of retrofit training courses and the interest in retrofit training and interest from learners. So the Herts team used some of the implementation funding that came through the scheme to support colleges to improve their retrofit provision for local businesses and young people through what you'll see there, the retrofit skills grant, which was one of their key aims. So as you can see here, and some pictures around on the slide in terms of what was delivered, and I think that brings it to life a bit more. The 4 key technical colleges in Hertfordshire use the funds to create additional heat pump and solar panel training facilities. They use them to support training courses and increase staff able to teach retrofit, which again is important because of the staffing issues and the lack of trainers that we talked about before, and then fund delivery of key retrofit qualifications. So the impact from this intervention really did increase the quantity and breadth of those colleges, improve facilities, gave them some more kit, set the stage for future partnership work between those colleges and schools. I think that was talked about earlier. It's really important to make those links and bring people together, and then that's what a lot of this pilot work has done. So really creating a legacy. Next slide, please, Rob. So I'm aware I'm running out of time, so I'll be as quick as I can. So East Sussex, apologies, I should say Sussex Employment Support, that's my fault. East Sussex determined 3 key ambitions for their 6-year retrofit skills strategy. Which is really good to see a longevity in their skills in their strategy. So that's increasing awareness of retrofit amongst residents, statutory organisations and businesses, promoting careers in retrofit and supporting inclusive recruitment. As I think we've heard about before, diversity is a key problem and issue in retrofit, and ensuring the right supply of training for new entrants and employees. So one of the so out of those key interventions that they actually carried out, which supports 2 of the 3 of those ambitions that I've just talked through, is the link between employment support and employment outcomes, leading to sustainable employment, obviously sustainable meaning longevity as well as green. So in order for this to happen in the retrofit sector, we need to ensure that employment advocates and brokers are really well versed, as we talked about before. We need to get it right in terms of the careers and upskilling and introducing the benefits and where to go to for retrofit training and how to get into the sector. So ensuring that those advocates and brokers are well versed in what retrofit is and where those opportunities exist for job seekers. And that can be replicated across different areas. It doesn't just have to be in terms of job seekers. You can use some of the materials that we've got in our packs to be able to use that in other areas. So the aim of this specific intervention was to help those careers advisors understand that role, and they delivered guidance sessions, as you can see there, for a large range of organisations, 39 attended, I believe, and produced information leaflets to support the training. And I believe working in partnership now with those organisations to create a pipeline for job seekers. So this had led to not just better support for job seekers and returners, but has really strengthened, this is really important, strengthen the collaboration to support skills and workforce required to accelerate retrofit activity across the county. So I myself have attended strategy workshops in East Sussex this week and retrofit skills plans, and the interventions are still very much a core part of their strategy and focus. This is also the case with local authority retrofit accelerator work in Surrey. Again, went to that earlier this week. Really great that the skills plans and the skills work that's been talked about is part of the legacy that this work has created. So very briefly, I'm aware I've completely run out of time, but just wanted to finish with some key achievements. So next slide, please. I'll let you read that briefly while I'm talking. There's a lot on this slide, really only a snapshot of those achievements. I'm not going to go into each one of them, I'll just let you read them. But a real snapshot of those achievements by our pilot teams across the 5 areas. What isn't reflected is the amount of partnership work that was involved in pulling all of this together, which, as Marissa said at the start, I believe is crucial and was a real key enabler to achieving everything that's listed here below. Just to highlight a few things, let's say the training to staff. Surrey provided training on PAS and heat pump awareness for staff, which has really aided their knowledge and supported them in procurement. And with the awareness raising, we have Buckinghamshire holding a big event, which has really galvanised activity in their county. East Sussex built and did that interesting work that we talked about, and then those 2 portals, Herts and South London, which are really still going now and worth looking at. You can just Google search them. Acting as hubs for provision in the sector in their areas, and Surrey, not to leave out Surrey's programme to drive diversity in the sector. So just leaving you with the headline outcomes there, really impressive, I think, in terms of what was achieved in a short amount of time with a modest amount of funding. And I thought that was a nice note to summarise the scale of work delivered there. And apologies for going over, but thank you, Rob.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks, Jen. And we need to make sure that the impact and the work that's being done is disseminated as widely as possible. So no worries on the time.
Thank you.
I think there's been a few kind of messages in the chat about the issue around demand and kind of perceived demand and demand that we know is coming down the line in terms of meeting net zero targets, and the demand that we hear from employers. And I guess that's where the work about raising awareness for employers about the funding opportunities, about the retrofit pipeline is so important, and making sure that we in local area projects are able to help SMEs in particular overcome some of those barriers and hurdles, even if the kind of perceived barriers and hurdles around accreditation as well, as kind of raising awareness of the opportunities that are coming up through future funding plans, such as Warm Homes Plan, for example. Really good insights again from a range of different areas, organisations at different levels of maturity in terms of their retrofit work. So really interesting to hear. If it's okay with everyone, we will take a quick 4-minute break and come back at 20 past, when we'll look at some of the common themes that have been raised through the 5 hubs work. And then we'll go on to look at the resources that have been created and have time still for 20 minutes of Q&A before we finish at 12. See you in 4 minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everyone. Slightly shorter than advertised break, but I hope everyone had time to stretch their legs and get a drink. So I'm just going to try to summarize some of the common themes. I think all of the hubs have done such fantastic work, and we are seeing a few kind of common themes, but also it's evident that there's a real benefit from having a local approach to these projects, depending on the level of maturity of, say, the supply chain or the trading provision or the skills and experience within local authorities. So it's a really interesting exercise to understand how we get the balance right between coordinating from a national approach and making sure we don't duplicate efforts, sharing best practice between different areas, but also making sure we take advantage of the local expertise and knowledge specific to each local area as well. So with that in mind, we'll just quickly move on to the kind of key learnings. So I put this under 6 headings, and they come from the National Retrofit Hubs Retrofit Task Force checklist. And before we look at each area individually, I think it's worth noting that probably one of the key themes that came out from everyone's presentations was that need to coordinate at a local level. So to get the training providers talking to the employers, to making sure that we understand the needs of employers, and bringing that kind of whole system approach. So all of these kind of 6 areas need to be working in tandem with each other at a local level. And also not forgetting Linda's important point around the fact that when we're talking about skills and skills gaps, retrofit is just one of many different parts of the kind of skills and employment sector that needs people to go and work in those areas. So it can't sit in a kind of silo by itself either. So we need to be aware of those other kind of competing interests as well. So just to go through quickly in terms of the learnings, we've got the visibility of the retrofit pipeline, which I think has been raised in all 5 areas. And this comes back to that question about demand for training places. Employers have to have that kind of confidence and security about the work going forward to enable them to be able to invest their time, money and equipment into training. And that's the same for training providers as well, of course, not just employers and the workforce. The importance of understanding the supply chain, I think we saw it can be a real challenge gathering the kind of retrofit specific supply chain data, given the range of work undertaken by SMEs in the sector. So that's just something I think to note, but the importance of having that data on which actors are in a local area and what their needs are is absolutely key to making sure that we're targeting the engagement activities and also the training to the right organisations in each local area. In terms of the training provision and infrastructure, I don't think I've put it here, but obviously one of the key kind of challenges is around training tutors and recruiting tutors in colleges. But in terms of what we need to do for learners and employers, the course delivery needs to be as flexible as possible to be able to respond to the market at local level. So tailoring courses, part-time courses, out of hours teaching. We've seen real progress in terms of the collaboration between training providers in local areas, really good examples. Forgive Marissa's example in the Northwest, we've got different training providers, and in the Northeast as well, working together to cover different parts of the training provision that's required at a local level. Seeing real success there. Is there something in terms of a blueprint that we can replicate in other areas? And colleges collaborating usually can also support the demand issues. So hopefully benefits for them as well. In terms of developing local SMEs, that kind of raising awareness of opportunities really kind of shone through when research was carried out directly with employers, and there was a kind of lack of awareness of the funding opportunities that were out there. And so that kind of ties into that kind of lack of demand, because employers aren't aware of the opportunities that are around the corner with government funded schemes such as Warm Homes Plan. And then the excellent work that was done in engaging with employers through the project, through events, really helped to kind of myth bust some of those perceptions around training and qualifications, and hopefully led to more uptake on courses where you could demonstrate that it didn't necessarily take a huge amount to gain accreditation to work on various schemes. In terms of the training for the kind of wider roles within retrofit, I think the partnership element of the project was really key. There were issues around freeing up local authority staff for training, as Jen said, around kind of quite technical elements in retrofit. So there are certainly challenges there that need to be addressed. But where the kind of really difficult kind of heavy lifting in terms of building collaborations at local levels was successfully done, I think we saw some really good results and outcomes from speeding up the delivery in the training in local areas. And then finally, on the promoting retrofit careers, we've seen a huge amount of resources funded through the project. But there's still kind of going to be gaps nationally where organisations are going to be looking to develop their own resources. So what can we do to make sure that the resources that have been created through the project are disseminated as widely as possible, so they don't need to be duplicated? And also, how can we, and I think this is a really kind of important point to make, it's very difficult to measure the impact that we have in terms of the careers work that we do in schools and with new starters in the sector. So how can we work to better monitor and evaluate the impact of these activities over the longer term to make sure that we can demonstrate the value that we're bringing through these activities in terms of growing the workforce over the coming years? So quickly move on to the resources, and as we've said, we'll be sharing all of the slides after the session so that you'll have access to all of the web links that have been created through the project and all of the great resources that are online in the Hub's websites. But I've just created one slide here to put all of the links to each of the Hub's resources in one place. So hopefully you can go through, have a look at the plans, the evaluation reports, and some of the resources that have been created in each of the 5 areas. Hopefully that kind of helps people navigate the resources that are available and created through the projects. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on this Retrofit Skills Task Force checklist again. So this is something that Cara Jenkinson and Pippa Palmer developed through their work for the National Retrofit Hub last year. I think it provides a really good framework for local areas to be able to understand the different elements that need to be in place for us to really develop strong, sustainable retrofit workforces in a local area. So we've got those kind of headings across the top again: the visibility of retrofit pipeline, understanding supply chain, training provision infrastructure, the retrofit program, procurement, developing local SMEs, training for all roles impacted, and the promoting retrofit careers. And within that, you've got the subtopics. And it's really key, I think, to note that we need each of these areas to be working in tandem in a local area for us to be able to build a successful retrofit workforce. And local authorities and local organisations can use this framework to kind of allocate the activities that they're undertaking to each of these topics and subtopics within the framework, and hopefully tick off each of these areas one by one so that you're creating an ecosystem where everything's working together. So quite a useful resource, I think, for local authorities going forward, in terms of how you can plan, because if one part of the framework isn't there, then the others will suffer and won't be as successful. So really important just to keep that in mind if you're planning retrofit activities in local areas, that each of these areas need to be catered for. This is a kind of a live framework, if you like. So another advantage of the webinar and these events is to get people's feedback on the framework. If there's anything missing here, we'd love to hear about what else needs to be included, so that we can develop and improve this framework as we move forward as well, so that it's a useful document for local authorities going into the future. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Cara. We've managed to catch up a little bit of time there, and move into the Q&A section. So Cara, are you available to pull up some of the questions that we've had in the chat of the session so far?
Absolutely, Rob. Yeah, just before I do that, I just wanted to mention that the working group is working at finalising a white paper, which brings together our asks for government, and very much reflects a lot of the challenges and successes that have been reflected in the presentations today. That will be launched hopefully at the end of April, so just a signpost to that. So yeah, a busy chat. So I will pull out a few questions. I know some of them have been answered in the chat themselves. Yeah, and there was a question from Linda Clark as to any involvement from trade unions at all. Anyone that did involve trade unions, put your hand up. Okay.
Cara, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the raise hand button.
Same.
It was hidden under a love heart. I apologize. Just to say, I've met through a few trade unions in work, you know, in response to this work, which is really great because yeah, I think there's a lot of common ground and shared goals, you know, with some of the work that trade unions are doing. So, you know, through ad hoc conversations and developing this plan with it, and then being connected to people working as, you know, Northwest environment officers, and understanding programs that they're running, and you know, that there could be great benefit in understanding, you know, how our aims in the skills plans can, you know, be complementary to what they're doing. So not specific and direct, but yes, definitely aware and understand how that there are some real commonalities that we could work with in this space.
Yeah, similarly, I think in the Greater South East, I mean, some of the pilot groups looked at working with a great deal of stakeholders. Those did include trade unions, and sort of raising that awareness and talking about some of the issues that may come out of this. And we talked a lot about some of the, you know, the workforce changes that are going to need to happen. So it's you know, it's crucial that trade unions are a part of that, and I believe they were in terms of the individual stakeholders that were contacted. Again, we had a lot of information to bring across in slides. We weren't able to reflect everything, which is why I really sort of suggest everyone has a good look at the plans and look at the materials around that have been supplied, because there's a real rich amount of information and material in there.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So there was a question for Linda Owen about the retrofit assessors and retrofit coordinators, and it was specific about the contingent being relatively healthy in Dorset, in Devon and Cornwall. And I guess perhaps generalise this a bit more about why in some areas there are more retrofit assessors and coordinators in others. Is that driven by government work, or is that being driven by kind of sole traders doing private owner occupiers. But yeah, Linda, I don't know if you have any insights on that.
Yeah, I was just busy messaging my colleagues while we were on the break to see if I could get an absolute answer, which I haven't got. But I think probably, as the question asker theorised, it's likely that certainly Cornwall Council has been quite active in delivering the government-funded retrofit programme. So it's quite likely that because they require those roles, that has led to a good number of people offering that service in that part of the country. But I guess it overlaps as well with somebody who was just asking much further down the chat about able to pay market, which wasn't the focus, obviously, of our work, but is and will be and is growing as a sector. And that's where I think a lot of the demand is going to come from. I can't actually remember why I wanted to mention that. It felt relevant, but I'll just stop talking and let someone else say what their view is in terms of. I guess it was relevant because at the moment, the government funded programmes are what's driving the need for skills in retrofit. But what I think is that the able to pay sector is what will drive the future demand, because it's a much larger sector. And so that's where we need to be focusing going forwards. But yes, at the moment, the areas that have good provision is most likely because there's been a solid and consistent delivery of government funded programmes. Sorry, that was a bit.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Linda. Okay, another question from another Linda, well, the same Linda that asked the union question, and that's around direct labour organisations. So some councils still have them a lot, housing providers, some have less so. So were they involved at all? Did you think about DLOs in doing that planning process? Anyone to answer on this one? Just to make sure there are no hands that I'm missing. Okay, from that, I'm going to take it that it wasn't a major consideration, unless anyone wants to say differently.
I'd need to delve back into the plan as well, because it was individual areas delivered. So again, look through the plans. I will just having a quick look now, but I'm happy to come back to that if we need to.
Yes, thank you. There was a question from Sarah Price, which I think is really important, given that we've seen a kind of burgeoning of different training courses being provided. Did anyone look at the quality of the retrofit training courses being provided?
I think we've looked at, there's been a wider sort of, sorry, Marissa, you've got your hand up. You're being polite and I'm not.
No, jump in. That's okay. I'll go after you.
No, I think that was an intrinsic part, and a lot of work that we're doing is about making sure that people, like for instance with the trainer work that was done, and I say individual pilot leads may want to jump in and correct me, but a lot of the work that was done there was to make sure that the quality of that training isn't, it's not just a tick box, that actually that the colleges are able to really make sure that the training that goes out is important. I mean, obviously, a number of our pilot leads worked with stakeholders in the college industry. There were some independent training providers as well, but I think it was more around the colleges. So there's probably a wider question about independent training provision and quality that wasn't necessarily looked at. But again, very reasonably small in terms of time period pilots, but we could do further work in that if needed to. But yeah, it was certainly intrinsic. We didn't take apart quality and look at it specifically. No.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Marissa.
Yeah, we didn't audit quality of training beyond, understanding Ofsted across areas. But yes, it came up a lot as a I suppose, key question from stakeholders throughout. And I think one of our recommendations in the pilot was to create regional centres of excellence to support everyone upskill at the same consistency, in a local area. We were thinking sub-regional, we've got 5 sub-regions in the Northwest. How can people come together to create a centre where they can discuss quality, consistency of provision, troubleshoot, because everyone is learning at the same time as well, and having, as we said in our pilots, that collaboration, especially across colleges, was really well received, and also to support supply and demand of courses. So yeah, quality was a key concern within the remit, but not audited particularly.
Thank you, Marissa. And Karen?
Just to build on that, really, I think when you take on a piece of work like this, you're very conscious of not just what you can do, but what the limitations are. Yes, quality comes up as a kind of common theme and concern, but in terms of what we could do, we knew we couldn't do a deep dive into the quality of courses, and in the same way that we're now starting to follow through doing a bit of kind of extra work looking at careers advice and guidance and the quality of that across the region. I think there are a number of areas, and quality of provision is one of them that actually warrant a kind of separate study and a bit more of a deep dive to really understand properly.
Yeah. Thank you. And Poneema?
I was going to say the same. We didn't really have time to kind of look at the kind of audit the quality of the training. However, I think it's fair to say kind of, if we're going to kind of recommend any training courses, it might be worth kind of making sure they kind of, fully accredited and stuff like that. But no, we didn't have the time to look at the training quality as well.
Okay, thank you very much all. So Sarah had another question, and we've sort of touched on this a bit, but it's about whether work was done specifically aimed at the owner-occupier market. Linda's talked about that being almost the challenge of the future, but wondering what kind of came out of those plans to suggest what could be done right now to increase the skills of those within the general repairs and maintenance sector on retrofit and energy efficiency. Anyone, Jen or Marissa? I think I can see you all.
Sorry, go on, Marissa.
I just wanted to clarify, owner occupier as in able to pay, or
Yeah, I think that isn't specified in the question, but I would guess, well, perhaps just more generally, to be honest, it shouldn't just be about able to pay. It should be, about those perhaps that don't qualify for the funded schemes.
Okay. I suppose everything that came from the report to me is everything has to be looked at as a whole systems approach. So, we were obviously looking in detailed gaps between, funding and skills gaps. But obviously, the whole system is taken into account in that. It's not just, the grant-funded delivery can deliver it all. I think we've got some key policy markers to come this year, which will be really interesting. We know government has an ambition now to move from, thousands of homes to millions of homes. These are statements that are being made and a plan to be released. So I'm interested in the policy markers to come as well. I suppose I think we still are also in that early adopter stage, and we need to think about this and prepare still for a boom. The skills, while we have an influx of grants, we need to think about where we are, I suppose, in the cycle of uplift. And in the skills report in the Northwest, we have 88% of homes on the gas grid. If heat pumps are rolled out at the scale, that they are currently, it's going to take 300 years. But we know with, if we put the combi boiler you know, change in rate, you know, applied to heat pump rate needed, it can take 17 years. So that's how we can see, you know, there's a whole system that needs to kind of change and be built up at the same time. So maybe, you know, I'm an optimist. I'm still at the stage of preparing for that boom, you know, and how we support this, even at the small scale, and how we build and integrate those programs. There's some great examples out there. You know, in the Northwest, there are some really great grant-funded programs that are, you know, like Cozy Homes in Lancashire, Chill, who are 100% UK manufacturer. They will, and local suppliers only. They use their admin budgets to build in, you know, a local supply chain and local capacity, support with registration. And, you know, you can only work in those grant funded programs if you are a local, you know, and they are trying to build that capacity. So there are ways that we can join up the system and really start to prepare. And I think that that's yeah, one of the key messages I took from this work.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make the point as well. I think with the owner-occupied sector, it's really important to get RMI builders having that base knowledge of the whole house, and to gain that through their, you know, as new builders are being trained through colleges in basic construction training, for that to incorporate that whole house understanding. And that's why Energy Systems Catapult, Rob, with the help of Retrofit Hub, are developing some building physics training resources designed at those early stage construction learners in colleges to boost those skills. Not going to solve it in the short term, but hopefully will help in the longer term in that build up. A question from Sandy Rushton. So are the pilots, have they engaged with the existing retrofit workforce, for example, to help them grow their business, take on apprentices, perhaps for them, those retrofit business to support colleges or other organisations with developing skills? How can we enable people with existing retrofit skills to spread their expertise around? Who'd like to answer that one?
Yeah, so it's certainly something that was looked at across our employers, particularly, you know, employers of not only just the traditional retrofit employers that are already in the space, but others in the construction sector that, you know, are vaguely aware of retrofit but don't really know the detail and don't know what, you know, don't really get the urgency and the need for the need to reskill. So that was a key component in a number of the pilot programs that were there, and you know, and as I say, there were courses put on particularly to support retrofit awareness in those areas. So
Jen, I think the question was more about for those businesses that are already doing retrofit,
right.
The smaller businesses.
Oh, sorry.
How do you enable them
in the chat and do that? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. How do you enable them to do more, have more impact, help others in the sector?
Right. Yeah, sorry, apologies. I'm trying to do too many things at once. I'll concentrate now.
That's all right. And I can see Panima has her hand up, so perhaps you've got an answer for that one.
Not going to answer, but obviously because, you know, the plans were developed by the 3 LAs, but if I remember well, it's been a while since we've done these projects, but also like I said, they did look into kind of, you know, workplace strategy was developed. So I don't really know exactly, you know, how many kind of businesses they looked at, but there was kind of, you know, how we can kind of encourage these businesses to take on apprentices. So they did kind of, obviously I can share the report, but I've not got the answer, but it was kind of looked at, touched upon, I can say.
Thank you. And Karen?
Yeah, I think obviously in our case, it was about the networks, and that we were kind of trying to create, and I say we, no, the organisations themselves are looking to create, and we were kind of acting as facilitators. That those kind of starting points wouldn't have happened if the ideas and the intent and the purpose didn't already exist. So I think, you know, there's a lot of just enabling people to come together that goes a long way, and allowing people to kind of build those connections and you know, build their kind of portfolios one step at a time from there.
Thank you. And Jen.
Yeah, briefly to address that, yeah, apologies again. So there were in a number of areas, things like employer support grants for retrofit businesses to enable them to access the training, because as I say, we know it's very difficult for those businesses that are already in those areas. They're quite in demand, so they need as much support as possible in order to be able to access that training. So that was certainly piloted and was pretty successful. I mean, I think we probably need to look wider than grants for an overall solution, but certainly that was something that was looked at. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and certainly our findings from the research we did within the hub that there needs to be more support for businesses, small businesses, to take on apprentices. That there used to be a lot more support offered by colleges, and that is something that needs to happen in a much better way to both support them to recruit apprentices, but also to retain them as they learn as well. Rob, how much more time do we have? I don't want to eat into.
Well, we finish in 9 minutes. Matthew's been waiting patiently with his hand up. If you want to hear from Matthew with a question.
Yeah, sure. Go for it,
Thank
Matthew.
you, yeah. Thank you. No, it's a great event. Good to be on this. I'm sort of in between contracts at the moment in retrofit. Worked in the sector until local authorities kind of started to run out of money in 2021 to 23. Came in with a green skills fund, with a skills funding that came in under the last government. I think there was 6 months or a year worth of funding. So I was working full time in retrofit under that. Very sketchy though, and now we're in a sort of period of hiatus because that money has run out and my contract ran out in January. So thank God I kept up my accreditation in my other field, which was building roads really, which I gave up in 2002. I'm about to go back into that and build more roads starting in a couple of weeks. So that will keep me going. But retrofit is my love. It's what I've been doing for over 20 years, one way or another, in one guise or another. And I look forward to going back into that. So I'm glad I kept up my accreditation in and skills in building roads. I'm going to be doing that for a while. Whilst we hear what the Warm Homes grant is. I think also a previous point about the quality of courses, I was delivering the NOCN course, Understanding Domestic Retrofit. This was under the time-limited skills funding from local authority funding, and also the level 3 domestic retrofit advice course as well.
Yep.
Delivering those two. The money is gone for those, so I'm going back to building roads. Maybe it will come back. The other thing, I've just started a course with TfL, Urban Design Learning, which is part of Transport for London. So if anyone in the Southeast is interested in that course, we are still delivering that.
So is your question about demand, Matthew? Sorry, we just
So there is a question about demand, and I guess my situation communicates that there is no work in retrofit in the UK at the moment. Whilst we hear what the new funding's do. But in terms of accreditation, the IHBC, which is my institute, does accredit courses. So our next job with TfL is to get accreditation.
Matthew, I'm going to just stop you there because we do have other questions, and I just want to move us on because we've only got 5 minutes left.
There is a way of accrediting courses. So that was the original question. There is a method for that. The IHBC does accredit courses. Other bodies accredit courses. So look at the IHBC accreditation. So that was just the point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I mean, I think the point about the long-term funding is absolutely critical, particularly whether it's the programs themselves or the training grants. So there have been lots of examples of kind of really short-term training grants, 6 months worth of funding, and that just isn't enough time to develop courses, get people to undertake those courses, and that is a real challenge and one of our very clear recommendations in the white paper that we're going to be producing. Okay, right. So
I think the question about demand as well, obviously we're talking about the regional skills pilots, which was focusing on training provision in local areas, and there are lots of other factors that influence the kind of demand for courses as well that aren't within the kind of remit of these particular projects. But I think Catherine makes a good point in the chat there about making sure that the industry is ready in terms of the training provision for future funding that's coming on stream soon as well. So making sure that we're ready with the resources, the right training to cover all of those skills gaps for when funding and investment comes in the future, so that we're not caught cold on that front.
okay, so I'm just looking through the chat now. I can see lots of useful introductions between people and links to resources, which is great. Just, I think one question that sort of came out, and it's been partially addressed in the chat, but there's a sort of superficial focus quite a lot on heat pumps, on solar, with insulation perhaps featuring a little bit less. And I know there have been comments that it's there in the detailed plans, but yeah, I just wondered if anyone wanted to comment on that, the balance between the fabric measures and the renewable heating. Marissa.
Yeah, I think I've had this comment before when we were going through a review of it in the Northwest. I think the two pinch points were retrofit coordination and heat pump, where the most pressure. So that's why they probably come out in a 10-minute, presentation as, the most discussed. But the insulation, fabric first, your word counted in the report, and it's probably mentioned the exact same amount of times. But when we're kind of pulling it and distilling key messages. So yeah, there's some real pinch points, I think, and the data shows that, which is why they come forward today. But there's still discussions being had across colleges with the whole suite of retrofit measures. And I think interestingly as well, how trades work, in delivering insulation is a really, through what we've said before, is in the sector is broken down into trades in a different way that retrofit and measures sometimes operate. So some really useful pointers in the plans.
Yeah. Just wondered, as a follow-on, did any of the hubs look at, in terms of the government-funded programs delivered so far, where the workforce was coming from, and whether that was being delivered by people in the region, or whether the workforce was coming in from outside of the region? Was any analysis done on that at all? Jen.
I'll put my hand up. It's not an answer that's yes in terms of the scope of the pilots. That's not what we were asked to do, and obviously with a short amount of time, you have to focus in on the key elements. But yes, certainly that's something that we all look at as hubs as a general rule, and that's something that I did talk to slightly in my slides. Could talk about it a lot more in terms of allowing and where the sort of, I use the word upskill, but it's not necessarily the right word for local authority officers in supporting their procurement. It's not just about that as well. It's not just about the technical skills and knowing some of the parameters that air source heat pumps have to be in, but it's also about knowing the networks and the businesses in your area as well. So it's all part of it. It wasn't an intrinsic part of the brief to look at it, but certainly that's something that we all do concentrate on as hubs, and particularly driving, local businesses, local economic development, driving social value through the procurement, which is, something that I know you and I, Cara, have talked about in great length in the past. The importance of local supply chain. So that's all intrinsic to it, but it wasn't a specific part of the brief. Hence why we haven't concentrated on it today.
Okay, and I'm aware that it's 11:59, so I think I'm going to hand back to Rob just to close off.
Thanks, Cara. And a huge thank you to all of our representatives from the Net Zero Hubs today. It's been fantastic to hear the range of different activities that have taken place through this project, and it's given us some real insights about what it means to work on the front line in terms of building those essential collaborations and coordination at a local level, linking employers with training providers and local authorities so that we can really drive forward on the training provision in a kind of targeted and data-led way. So thank you so much to everyone for coming and presenting today. And thank you to everyone who's attended and for all of the questions today as well. We will be sending out the recording and the slide deck after the session's finished, and look forward to you joining us hopefully for the next webinar in what's quite a busy schedule over the coming weeks. So thank you everyone, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thank you, bye.
Thanks, Rob.